So hello, my name is Kuldip and welcome to our first of our 22 series of Cloud Insight Roundtables. It's a chance to corner some of the thornier topics around cloud adoption and explore the causes and cures of the pain we sometimes experience. Now, we'll tend to start with the market and business drivers, then steer a course to some of the answers that'll help. The aim is to share insight, advice, best practice from insiders so that you can harness the right cloud solutions to help your business succeed. So you're in charge today. Take this opportunity to drive the direction of our discussion by submitting questions that matter to you. Today's thorny topic is utilizing cloud to give your data a new edge. And the simple reason why I have started this series on the subject of data is because it is taxing every business leader that I speak to. Why? Well, IDC predict 9 zettabytes of data produced globally by 2024. That's a staggering 1 terabyte for every human on the planet. And much of this data is being gathered by organizations, added to by Internet of Things, and moved to the edge, the increasing use of AI, and even that conundrum of keeping your most valuable assets safe. Add to that the complexity of hybrid cloud and limited budgets, and that environment challenges us all. So to help you with this, new tools are being introduced almost daily. And even though you don't want to miss a trick, you do need to work with partners to make sense of what is useful. So how do you get your arms around all the moving parts to be confident that you aren't missing that trick? That's what this session is all about. We have 3 subject matter experts that are in the center of this industry and will offer their insights and tips. So use this opportunity to steer that conversation by submitting questions in the question section you see in the panel towards the right of your screen. I'll also ask a polling question from time to time to gauge your views on your cloud journey and how you're doing. So to our illustrious panel. So guys, I'll ask each of you to do a short intro and please include the big trends you see in the market when it comes to customers managing their data. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Kuldip, and hello to everybody viewing today. My name is Alex Hilton, and I am the Chief Executive of the Cloud Industry Forum. We are an IT trade body. If you're not familiar with us, we've been operating for 12 years, in fact. We're UK-based, and our remit and principles really are that we are advocates of the cloud, but not at all costs type of thing. So, we've seen many organizations going with this cloud-first policy, which obviously we would support, but I think the general principle around what we look for is a balanced approach to where cloud is appropriate and relevant. There are things that we deliver for our members, and our members are the industry. There's a little bit of a paradox in there, in so much as that's the hand that feeds us, yet we fiercely protect this position of independence. We conduct research on behalf of the industry and, of course, OVH, our members, as you would expect. And within that research, we try to look at trends and identify really what we see happening in the market. I'll come on to some of those things as we go through the course of the conversation, but the essence of it is a very high headline point. For the last 12 years that we've been doing this is clearly, we know cloud adoption it is very much prevalent and a driving technology that we see in the industry. Some 94% of organizations are utilizing cloud services now. Our latest research, which we haven't actually released, but I am going to talk to, don't tell my PR people, please, will identify some of the trends that we see happening in the market. Notably, over the last couple of years, of course, the trends towards digital transformation as we've been on this extraordinary technology journey, aside of any personal stories that we have to tell around this one, it is really paramount. And I think that's some of the points that I'll touch on. Shall I leave it at that for now, Kuldip, and then we'll come back to some of the points as we go through the conversation?
Yeah, that's a good start. So, Heikki?
Thank you, Kuldip, and hello everyone on my behalf as well. My name is Heikki Nousiainen, and I'm a Chief Technology Officer at Aiven. We are a database as a service provider and are really happy to recently partner also with OVH to bring about these capabilities available to customers for their benefit. maybe I could continue a little bit on that digital transformation. We're certainly seeing data increasing the use as at the core of business and drive all decision making, perhaps distinction from the past analytics and reporting use case. And this in turn is driving a very rapid and real-time requirements on the data use. On the other hand, we see a lot of innovation stemming from being able to access and utilize and combine data from different sources, and we see this as a driving requirement for access to data, both in terms of governance and managing that access, as well as then selecting technologies that provide that access throughout organizations.
Cool. Okay, Hiran.
Hi, yeah, my name is Hiran Parek, and I'm the VP for Northern Europe at OVHcloud. I've been with the business over 6 years now. Our value is really we're a cloud service provider that really believes in the freedom of data, the sort of sovereignty of data as well. And of course, the ability of interoperability and transparency, and providing services with partnerships like with Avon and other technology partners that are really bringing, the expertise of those subject matter experts, such as Avon on databases, and the ability of kind of scale and automation of OVHcloud, and combining to provide solutions for our customers.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to start with a bit of a polling question to understand what or where people are. So the first question I'm going to ask the audience: what's the biggest challenge you face around data management? So talking to many of our customers, it could be around spiraling costs because of service sprawl, extracting insights, security, trusting new platforms, skills gaps. You may not have any major challenges. It'll be interesting to find out, but it'd be useful to gauge your view. So give us your opinion as to where you are in all of this, and then we can start tailoring our thinking to what challenges you're facing. So Heikki, this is a challenge that you speak to your customers all about. What is it that you think will be the top answer? Are you going to take a guess at that?
Well, at least we certainly see the lack of skill and lack of general lack of people with operating data management technologies at the number and kind of at the scale needed by the business today. Or maybe to tackle it from other side, I think running infrastructure in general is away from using those resources to really focus on solving them and addressing the business challenges and building business.
Okay, right. So I'm going to close the poll. Let's have a look at what we've got. So we have got a split. Some of it, well, I think you predicted it quite neatly. We have 38% talking about storage, service sprawl, spiraling costs. Exactly 38% also security, trust in new platforms. And we have a quarter saying skills gap. So some of those things, Heikki, I think you hit the nail on the head. Right, so let's start thinking about what insights you have to address those challenges. Yeah, what can you share in terms of overcoming them? Heikki, first, what about you? You've already started, so let's carry
on. So certainly, we're databases as service providers, so definitely we aim to help developers and teams and organizations to relieve some of that skills gaps and a number of people being able to allocate resources indeed on top of the business problems instead of perhaps running infrastructure. Similarly, we speak daily about that being able to access the right data across the organization for innovation. So having a standard set of technologies, having a good governance in place, having a standard way of managing access to the systems, having that shared, say, pane of or control pane of window that can then manage all the services definitely benefits those efforts.
Okay.
And time to market is crucial for everyone. So being able to utilize database as a service technologies perhaps helps to cut down the time it takes to get projects up and running and being productive.
Okay. Right. So, Hiran, well, what's your take on how we can help them overcome these challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I agree with some of the comments shared by Heikki there and the poll as well. And I think if I break it down into 3 areas, one is around data management, the other is security, and then solution, let's say. If we look first at data management, I think the right tool selection to help unify data sets. I think often we find that there are multiple data sets that can still leave gaps, whether it's outdated data, unverified, and the tool selection here with the knowledge or skill set is super important in terms of how to leverage that data and maximize it. So I think it's important that businesses are considering how to either upskill internally or work with partners that can give them leverage, whether it's a managed service or more insights into that data, and this is how they can leverage. When we talk at security, it's ensuring that the tools that they are using or the cloud providers that they're using, where these are hosted, meet the level of compliance and whether this is geographical or industry. And I think most are familiar with ISO 27001 or SOC 1 and 2. But I think there's a kind of deeper level now as we see in this new world of data and what does that really mean. And we have things like the ANSI, there is the Secnum Cloud in France, or there's a C5 in Germany. And I think there are more specific. And as we move, even according to industry and vertical, we will see more and more legislation or specifics around data management quality. So I think it's super important that people understand this element of compliance, geographical, whether it's industry or vertical, and understanding that the tools that they do select or the providers also meet a level of compliance, which is the promise to your end customer that you have. And also when we look at the solution side of things, I think the hugest thing right today to consider is how can you have some hybridity to the solution that you deploy and use for this data. We all know the saying, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? So it's how to deploy a hybrid cloud strategy that does allow that portability or interoperability. I think this is super crucial as you build this strategy on how you would maintain and evolve that data and then leverage it to the best for business benefit.
Okay. And Alex, what's your take?
I like the word hybridity here, and I've actually written that down. That was a new one on me, but I like it. It's good. It works.
It's got a copy. It's got license, right? It'll cost you.
Okay. I'll forget I said it then. Look, I was just jotting down notes as you're kind of talking through that stuff, because I think it's really interesting. Firstly, I think the polling answers are very interesting. So the top 3, if I heard you correctly, they called it was storage, security, and skills gap. Kind of in that order. They actually all fall in the same bucket, frankly. Okay, so so obviously this is a data-driven conversation. Storage is kind of relevant and key to that one, but the other side of that is very much security. It's it's the other side of the coin, so to speak. And then the lack of skills in place to help organizations, through the mire of kind of figuring out what to do. Hiran's talked a little bit about compliance and the challenges faced around that. That's key with data. I mean, that's paramount. It's a fundamental thing in there. And what we've certainly seen from our research at Cloud Industry Forum is, and this has been much publicized, the pandemic has accelerated cloud adoption at an enormous rate. And actually, maybe expect me to say this, it's proven its worth. There's a value in there that perhaps, prior to the pandemic, we hadn't really fully realized. The acceleration of adoption has been amazing, phenomenal. But it's also led to other challenges along the way, many of which are well documented now. Again, looking at our research, moving forward, some 51% of organizations now expect that hybrid working will be a permanent feature of their organization. In fact, during the pandemic, nearly 2/3 of organizations had to enable hybrid working, but they don't necessarily want that to be the way for the future. And that brings with it, of course, other data challenges in terms of the accessibility and the security. On the topic of security, that is a big issue. And, for the 12 years we've been running our research, we always ask people at a very high level, what are your biggest inhibitors or barriers to cloud adoption? And every year, security has been the #1 barrier to adoption. Now, what's really interesting for us this year is it's not the #1. That's the first time that has ever happened. The issues actually that organizations are facing are things like migration and legacy integration and things of this nature, okay? Security is still a big concern, and it's one of the top spends in the market, but organizations are much more tolerant and accepting, and I guess just have a level of maturity, without being patronizing, I hope, about that they understand that cloud actually can deliver a more secure environment. What we've also seen happen in here is the lack of skills is slowing down adoption. So you've kind of got these two lines, linear, paths that are crossing to a degree, where there's an accelerated rate of innovation and adoption that has been required over the period of the pandemic, and yet the skills are kind of diminishing. Well, not diminishing, but they're not growing at the same exponential type rate. So that's creating other challenges. So hence, businesses need to rely on skilled providers in the market who can bring that expertise in. The final point I'll make, and then I'll shut up for a moment, is actually just stack ranking and looking at what we've seen the priorities have been for organizations as they move forward in terms of technology priorities, okay? Now, you would expect security to be in there. It's always a priority. It's never going to wait. But as I said earlier, it's no longer the barrier or the inhibitor that we've seen it as being in the past. Many organizations have reverted to, we've got to get the infrastructure right over the period of the pandemic, because that's often the start point around this one. It's not just about deploying Office 365 or Microsoft 365, that's a kind of fundamental, but getting the infrastructure off-prem into cloud-based services is a fundamental. And from there, you can build on with that. But actually, one of the biggest areas we've seen in terms of, the question we asked was stack rank the most important technology challenges in your business. And big data and analytics came in at 66%. So, 2/3 of organizations identify that as being one of the biggest challenges. I'll come back to some of those points later, if I may, Coldit, but I think it's very interesting, the challenges that organizations are facing, yet the opportunities that they now see in the market.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You get the two big trends. Probably that's why database as a service is just a recurring theme in our thinking. So I think let's pick out for the audience why we think this is so groundbreaking. Hiran, why don't you start with database as a service, and why don't you actually start with what you think is the best definition for them to get their head around?
Sure. I think, the term databases has been around for a while, right? And everyone's using them in some capacity, let's say. I guess my focus be more is on the as a service element, to say that, we talked earlier about the skills being scarce or the skills gap. And I guess the element of as a service provides a managed element, which is really going to free up time, skills, but also provide cost savings, that people can focus on what is core to their business, or what is core to making data-driven decisions for their business and how to use it. Because 66% of organizations say it is a focus for them. And I think having that element of as a service does just free up time and expertise or speciality that we may not have in-house, and therefore it just makes it more efficient. And I think finally, it's also the ability of scale. And how, once you've got a platform, how do you scale this easily and fast? And as we said, the rate at which data is growing today, I think that ability of scale and moving forward is crucial. And I think when you're trying to sort of, as an organization, sometimes fulfill that skills gap and also accelerate your business, it's often a challenge, right, that you're trying to balance. And therefore, by having certain elements where you're working with partners or as a service type model, just reduces that burden a bit and allows businesses to have faster traction and keep up with the pace at which data is growing and how we want to utilize that.
Okay, good points made. Heike, what's your take on database as a service? Obviously, this is your bread and butter.
Yeah, I think agree with a lot of what was said earlier. That we see the main benefit of database as a service is a acceleration of developments and freeing up engineering time from kind of infrastructure setup, management, monitoring, responding to any events, handling security patches, really saving people's time to focus on core application and business driver development. So that's number one benefit. Of course, having a central control and having kind of some standardization across the different teams on technologies makes it easier to reuse that data that is already collected within organization that can be utilized for innovation or creating new services or improving new services. I think that's a clear benefit that we see on our customer base. And then touching maybe on what Alex mentioned about the security and Hiren talked about the compliance. Of course, we do see that there's more and more shift into that compliance is just required. You need to be compliant with these regimes, and actually the ISO standard and SOC2 reporting, they have these requirements on ensuring compliance throughout the supplier chain. So having a trusted providers that can help these compliance efforts obviously will make maintaining or compliance of the entire operation easier. And just to extend on that bit, I think we see there's a very good signal. Our compliance requirements that are coming from our customers are always keeping us on improving on that side as well, and kind of it benefits then every customer of ours when we need to subject ourselves to different compliance regimes and stricter audits and so forth, for example.
Exactly, and it's that sort of customer push that makes sure that we stay fresh and innovate and so forth. Alex, from a general point of view, database as a service, tell us about what your audiences are telling you.
Yeah, certainly I'll endeavour to do that. And again, I think from our point of view, the Cloud Industry Forum, we're I guess we're generalists looking kind of holistically at the market rather than specialists, with the likes of Heikki, focused around database specifically. So, and I think you've highlighted the point quite eloquently at the start, called it, in terms of the volume of data, the prolific growth of data in the market, and this kind of exponential growth rate. And we've had all kinds of language around this. We defined as the new oil, the gold, or the currency, whatever we want to call it. And the principle around it, though, is anything that's that valuable also clearly has to be protected and secured appropriately, and the compliance components that both here and Heikki have made are very important in there. So I think businesses understand the value of the data. And it can support their commercial goals. If you're in the public sector, you might say, well, I don't have commercial goals, but you still have kind of service goals or customer goals. Or if you're not a sales driven organization in that same way, there are still goals, and data can be harnessed and utilized appropriately in there. It might be buying habits, it might be helping manage supply chain and predictability and things of that nature, utilizing that data. I think the organizational challenges that the businesses face are really how to harness that opportunity. I've got this data that we've been storing in some way. What do I now do with that? How do I utilize it? How do I take advantage of the benefits that cloud services bring? With the database as a service. When we talk about cloud, we talk about scalability, agility, and flexibility. Those are the kind of the main things, or what does it say here? Hybridity. I like that. So those components, but the scalability, agility, and flexibility, those are the things, those are the drivers. It sounds a bit marketing-y, but those are the drivers for cloud adoption. That's what's really moving people forward on this platform. Now, I think when we've been through the pandemic, as I referenced earlier, although we've seen an acceleration of, say, infrastructure services and enablement for businesses to allow employees to work from home and in this hybrid fashion. But what that's also done, and again, our research backs this up, is it's actually delayed certain projects such as AI and kind of big data, because organizations have had to go back to basics and go, have we enabled our staff to work in an appropriate manner, because we all did it. We all went into a little bit of kind of crazy panic mode as we're suddenly faced with this problem that we really couldn't even plan or expect for. How do you contingency plan for a pandemic, right? Okay, well, maybe we will do that a little better next time. But that's the challenge that organizations have faced. Now, also the other side of that, if that AI adoption has slowed, and by the way, data is the heart of AI, as I think you'll probably appreciate, then looking forwards over 22 and 23, we definitely see and predict a resurgence of those AI projects. The hyperscalers are pushing that message really hard, and there's some great case studies out there. But I think there's still quite a way to go on that journey. But I think that journey is going to accelerate over the course of this year and beyond. And clearly, database as a service is a core component of that.
Yeah, I must admit the customers we're talking to certainly they're resurrecting. They're looking at AI and making sure they're using that data. So I think you're right there. Okay, so folks, another polling question. So we've talked about database as a service. I'd like to know what your current thinking is on using database as a service. So you may already be using it, thinking of it. You've looked at it, but there's no plans, or you've not really given it much thought. So give us your thinking on it. Let's see, Alex, you very pointedly talked about that research. Where do you think the money's at here, from your opinion?
I think you're going to get some who are already going down this route. So I think we're certainly going to see quite a bit in the thinking of using in there. Maybe there are some who are starting to assess it. I think, I don't know, I guess you'll go. I think the nature of the topic and the fact that we're on the webinar talking about it, I don't think anybody's going to be in that bottom one. But I may be wrong. I think we might see an even split of thirds between the first three. But hey, now you're going to embarrass me and go, no, everybody has everybody has not even thought about it.
Right, yeah. Okay, folks, so if you do the final press of your buttons, I'm about to close this particular poll. Right, so we have 13%. Let me get rid of a call that I'm getting. So we have 13% who are already using it. We have 38% who are thinking of using it. We don't have anybody in the third category of having assessed it and no plans. And then we have half of our audience who have not thought about this area. So I think they're joining this call to try and make sense of this subject. And they're not alone. I mean, there's a lot of people I'm thinking who maybe dusting off those projects you said, Alex, in terms of, the pandemic has stalled much of the thinking, and it's now they're getting to the point where actually, yeah, we got a bit of headspace to start thinking about this again.
I mean, that's really interesting, Colin, to see that kind of split. So, I mean, clearly I was a country mile away from my estimation around that one. So that's also good, because it also means, we're hopefully talking to, a new audience here in terms of people who haven't really gone down this route before. And I think, doesn't that emphasize that, there really is a kind of a pot of gold here, I think, that organizations really need to be thinking about. But if half the audience has said they've not thought about this area, but clearly have taken the time to join a webinar that is focused in this area, it'd be interesting to assess this in, a few months' time or 12 months' time and see, where they are on that journey. I think there's much, much greater confidence in cloud security, as I've already talked about earlier. I think, again, what we've seen is most businesses are running hybrid, cloud on-prem type of environments in some form or another. So really it's now the process that they need to go to think about, what their goals are, the aspirations for the business. And kind of as we hopefully return to some kind of normality in our business, and our IT operational function is able to return to some kind of normality as well, is, well, what can this database as a service be for us, and how can that play a part within our digital transformation plan.
Okay, so don't go to the bookies today then, Alex. That might be something you want to avoid. Heikki, what do you think? Database as a solution? How do you actually? What's your tips to really maximize the impact of this?
Yes. So maybe also a little bit surprising result, but definitely I would kind of echo. There's a lot of room and benefits to be had. I will a little bit repeat on that database as a service we consider as a big accelerator of development processing, and really focusing resources on solving business problems, which is, I think, kind of the pace of the change and the digitalization. It's challenging every business everywhere. There's new companies trying to acquire parts of the market, and being able to respond that utilizing data and utilizing data as part of the core business. I think that's important. And there, kind of all managed services can help to cut down that time for new innovation and fasten those cycles where we can do innovation and implementation, see how things work, then adjust, and then kind of continuously be on these iterative cycles on meeting the business needs. Similarly, yeah, then database as a service. Just I want to share one example from our great retail company Adeo in France, and they are really going through this digital transformation phase, and database as a service solution has helped their developer experience team to create a standard set of tooling for teams to work on and to innovate. And they're running, I think, about parallel 200 different innovative projects on starting and seeing how they can maybe create some new innovations, try out new things, learn more, and they see the great benefit of getting into the actual development from day one and having a standard set of tooling, so everyone is kind of familiar that this is the way how the company operates, and we see some great benefits coming from that use case.
Okay, so Hiram, what's your tips in terms of this?
Sure. I mean, I'd take it again, probably based on really a use case or a customer story that we have. Let's say company is DM and Logistics. They specialize in vehicle transportation with real-time updates, which include images, video, metadata. And the managed database as a service solution, coming to some of the thoughts that we've shared earlier, is really allowing their teams, their dev teams, to focus on the application development and their core services, right, of how they can add value to the solution they're providing to their end customer, and not in sort of managing those databases and the updates, etc., and using a managed solution. So I think that this is some of the core benefits that they see, and you can see for live data around vehicle transportation, that's kind of masses of data that they have to manage in different formats. So it's not one type, several types of data at the same time. And I think the benefit, of course, here, as we talked earlier, is the ability to scale, right, and how to optimize the solution. So I think this is really allowing them to meet their growing business needs. It's allowing them to focus on their core business as opposed to what is a means for them to achieve their core business and value. Also, it comes with the added security and the compliance, the governance that we talked about earlier as well. And one of the other elements that we talked about as well is, with this being on open technology, there's no vendor lock-in, so it enables that hybridity. And I guess it comes back to a formal point as well to say, how do we have the right approach? And I think sometimes as business leaders, we need to think of, what is really my focus area? What is my speciality that I focus on? What is the value I bring? And then how do we leverage the value of those subject matter experts that are out there in various forms to enable that, right? Because sometimes it's quite easy to fall into this trap of trying to be the master of everything, but actually you can't, right? There are companies that are specializing in certain areas, such as Avon on databases, and utilizing maybe what they have is more beneficial than trying to create it yourself.
Okay, so now we're getting down and dirty, aren't we? So let's Heikki, why don't you just give the listeners a quick run through some of the key solutions you've come across, what's in it for them, what should they consider in all of this then?
Yes. So maybe to start off with what database as a service can provide. So that's kind of setup and operations and daily operations of the services, making sure that they are always available and monitored, and if there are any faults, they are recovered automatically, restored from backups if worse things would happen. Also operational in that sense that whenever there's a need for applying security software patches, those are applied on the user's behalf, and same with major version upgrades are managed. We've seen in some customer engagements before migrating to database service provider, maybe the customer had set up a technology Kafka cluster a couple of years ago, and since it works, no one touched it, but now upgrading it to the latest version becomes quite a hurdle. So those are the benefits. There's, I think, the maturity of the database as service providers has grown immensely, and I would say that as with software as a service, it has become the de facto way of offering the services rather than maybe the more traditional licensing business. So there's a lot of good options on the market, and utilizing any type of database services, if you can offload some of that maintenance of workload, it will help to make the development cycles faster. We typically, on top of that, we recommend find a solution that caters to different technology needs. So we offer a suite of different databases, not to try to mend one single product into all different kind of workloads or technology needs. Of course, procurement can be easier if you can go through a cloud provider such as OVHcloud and have all of those built on the same invoice. That makes things. And then, of course, very dear to us, we always recommend choosing open source, because open source then gives you that freedom and the option on revisiting these decisions, whether you want to host things under a managed service provider or on your own, whether you want to manage them on the cloud or on-prem, and you can revisit these choices at any point in time.
Okay, wow. Hiran, you've mentioned the partnership with Ivan. You want to tell us just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, like Heikki said, I think one of the key things is it's a partnership based on common values, and the reasons around this is, we want customers to be in control of their data. It is open source, it is secure. We have the right governance with GDPR, free from extraterritorial laws, if you like, right? So you're in control of your data, which is important. It brings trust and confidence to you, but also to your customers. I think the open source, no vendor lock-in, which is an important part, and of course the interoperability, which is what I talked about earlier, which allows you to have a true hybrid approach, which is super important as we move forward. Those are really the kind of value of this partnership. And again, it's Avon are experts in database as a service, and we're experts in cloud services and the ability to scale fast, which is also a key business driver or benefit for those looking to embark this journey. And those are some of the reasons and the value that we can bring, as highlighted by the customer use case that I shared earlier. Yeah.
Okay, so look, these areas are colliding at a fast pace of knots. We're inventing new terms by the day and by the minute, it looks like, Hiran. But yes, public cloud certainly is having its impact, and it's probably entering its heyday. So just share some tips with the listeners. What are the common pitfalls that they should avoid? So let's start with you, Alex. What are you thinking here?
Well, I don't say there's any pitfalls particularly, Colin. I think it's, any organization's move to any kind of cloud services, or indeed staying on premise and despising everything cloud, is really all about their attitude to risk. And every every technology has an element of risk associated with it. You know, for 99%, I would argue, of organizations, cloud, you know, delivers that very well in terms of, you know, a secure, trusted environment. You know, public cloud, and we did look at this in our research a couple of years ago. We looked at kind of the split between public cloud, private cloud, and, if you like, on-premise there. And they were kind of roughly split in thirds, but very much the growth sector was in public cloud. I think what we have seen more and more is, you know, we've seen some organizations even go to cloud and then step back a little bit from it as well, as they don't necessarily want to go all in on that one. So I think, again, the hybrid cloud environment is very much the future and where we see things being for the moment. There's another important factor, which I know this is not a topic for this discussion primarily, but I'll just throw it into the pot because when we launch our research, you'll be able to see this in more detail. You know, we do look at environmental and sustainability goals that organizations have. And, you know, I think this is pretty well publicized that data is a massive consumer, data centers, you know, but the proliferation of data is a massive consumer of resource in there. And I think it's important to look at the sustainability goals of the organization. Indeed, the sustainability capabilities and credentials of the provider that anybody's going to as well, because I think you're going to see this appearing more and more on the radar. It's quite a high procurement request now that organizations are putting in from their vendors. So I think that's something to think about and ask that question as well. But, you know, I think my final point around this would be that as far as public cloud is concerned, you know, it is very much seen now as kind of enterprise grade technology, you know, technology that certainly if you're a small or mid-sized business, you would not hitherto have had access to, but you can now at, frankly, a fraction of the cost, and indeed generally without a great deal of CapEx expenditure at all going in there. So it does deliver the resilience you need, it's absolutely the direction of travel that organizations will go in. Anybody who's not really gone down the route at the moment, I would recommend that they just start trialing services and you know, put even, you know, sandbox various environments and see where that will lead to them and how it will work for their environment, and then they can make their decisions from there as to how far or how quickly they go with it.
Okay, yeah. Some good insight there. Hiram, what about your tips? What's your thinking here?
Absolutely. I think, as Alex mentioned, sustainability with COP26 recently being on our doorstep, I think sustainability seems to be at the forefront. And certainly when we look at cloud services and data centers, very prominent. At OVHcloud, we do have a clear defined sustainability program. And absolutely, we are sustainable by design, that our data centers use liquid cooling and don't use air conditioning. Actually, we have a PUE rating of 1.09, so very conscious of this, and I think it will meet the list of more and more procurement frameworks, as Alex says, and more companies are conscious of what we can do, our bit to the environment. It's important for us all. And I think some of the other things as well, when we talk about, I think somewhat, as Alex said, maybe there's not pitfalls, there are advantages. But I guess for me, it's looking at the early adopters of public cloud, and I think it's perhaps the due diligence element to ensure that there's a thorough cloud readiness assessment that takes place. Maybe working with a partner or a consultant or in-house, but just understanding and, you know, assessing the right cloud solution or service, the database service that you'd be looking at, depending on the applications or the workloads, and just understanding of taking this kind of as a more step-by-step approach to ensure you have the right cloud solution for the right workloads, as opposed to, you know, there is no kind of one cloud fits all, if you like, right? And therefore, I think there's a greater need to just have a kind of due diligence element of it, I would say. And this is what we see in the market, but also considering what we talked about earlier, which is that hybrid cloud deployment model, which is not putting all your eggs in one basket, and therefore distributing workloads and creating some security as well and redundancy for yourself. That'd be sharing some of my thoughts.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Heike, you want to give us your take on this?
Yes, so I would definitely agree, and kind of in our view, the benefits of utilizing public clouds in terms of both engineering productivity and being able to address that requirements for scale, they are so great that I would recommend everyone to start a cloud journey immediately. Not so much as a pitfalls perhaps, but maybe a recommendation is that investment spent on governance and managing access rights and infrastructure as a code yield great returns. Usually as a starting cloud journey, you will end up this account and environment sprawl that is then a little bit difficult to bring back into control. But sometimes that might be still a cost that you're willing to pay. So I would definitely just recommend to start that cloud journey with a pilot project or pilot teams as soon as possible.
Right. So bit of a pilot. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Okay. Right. So we're going to ask one final polling question as we come into the close. Let's see now. Just as a quick thing, where are you in your journey? So give us your view so we get a feel for where you're at. Are you already using public cloud all the way still through to you will only ever use your own data centers, your own infrastructure? You might be even not sure. So give us your take on where you're at on this journey. Hiram, where do you think you do talk to a lot of customers? Where do you think the money's at on the answers here?
Where are you in your journey to public cloud for data? I think some people are using elements of it, maybe not fully. So I think it's somewhere between own DC and cloud. Let's say I think people are probably in between at the moment, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, folks, your last chance to press the button, and I'm about to close the poll. Okay, I think you're on the money. So we have 57% already using public cloud to some extent, 14% using is the second and third options, and then there is a contingent still on don't know enough, so won't change just yet. So there's a bit of a way to go in the enlightenment of public cloud, I think. So yeah, you bang on the money there, I think. Right, we are coming to the close here. So let's make really good use of the last few minutes here. Give us that one nugget of gold that you think will really help our listeners. Alex, well, over to you. What do you think?
Thanks, Calder. I think firstly, I think that 57% of organizations using public cloud is very interesting, and I think that kind of we back that up, I think, with our research and what we see there. So I think that's it's kind of there or thereabouts. I mean, maybe a little bit higher in some of the research we've seen, up to sort of 2/3 of organizations, but it's kind of in the right area. So I think that's pretty indicative. I think in terms of my takeaway comment for you, I suppose really now when I look back over the last 10, 12 years running the Cloud Industry Forum, gosh, back in the early days, we were literally whiteboarding and talking about what the cloud is, and is it the cloud or a cloud or a series of clouds out there, and all those kind of explanations that seem laughable to us now, really, don't they? But of course, we were talking about infrastructure and really SaaS type of based services at the moment, and then all these as a services have kind of derived from it and kind of fallen out the back of it as organizations look to innovate. I think the database opportunity is absolutely apparent, and arguably, if there is any one services that cloud is set up to deliver effectively, it would be that, outside perhaps of just raw infrastructure, that compute and power component in there. So I think the database opportunity is absolutely relevant for people, and I really just recommend organizations really look at it if they haven't gone there, which it sounds like quite a few haven't yet. Seize the opportunity. And really look to utilize the benefits that cloud broadly can bring to them. And we've talked about scalability, particularly. And any organization who has kind of, let's say, a seasonality component to their business, I mean, the cloud's perfect. That's what it does. You turn it on and off and up and down and charge by the minute and the second and so forth. That's the core. That's what it delivers. So, think about data. Don't just think about it on a project basis necessarily. Think about it more holistically, but also look at what the cloud can deliver for them as a part of that overall service that they're trying to achieve, and identifying the business goals, not the technology goals.
Okay, words of wisdom there. Heike, well, what's your words of wisdom?
Just say that I agree on that one. Want to just continue. Kind of data is of critical importance to modern business. It's in the very center of a business today, and I kind of feel that the cloud and database as a service can then be helpful components, helpful means of enabling and how to manage the data and how to address the scale of the amount of data that we capture and utilize all the time, and at the same time provide that access to the data so that we can build innovations, new services on of the already what we already have collected.
Okay, so Hiran, finish it off nicely for us. What's your golden nugget?
I mean, like, not to repeat everything that we've shared and said so far today, but I guess really it's just, look, data is at the heart of everything that we do. Data will continue to grow, and the references Alex made earlier, the new gold, the new oil, right? It's there, and data is there. And I guess the biggest thing here is, how does one maximize the opportunity? How do we leverage this data, create business benefit from this, but do it in a secure and compliant way? And cloud does bring a huge host of benefits that have been mentioned here. But I guess there's one that we also talk about, and sometimes I mentioned earlier, but we haven't talked in too much. I would say it's the cost element. So let's not just consider the cost of cloud, but then I would recommend that people also think about the cost of Ingress or Egress charges, because there is huge amounts of data transfer. And I think this is something that could often be scary for people, because that can mean this cost could potentially spiral, right? So those initial cloud services are one price, then you add everything up and it becomes something else. And I think this is the other element when you're selecting your partners, is to understand the full picture and not just the face value of what you see. And I think that's something that I would do. I would say, right? And that's one of the things at OVHcloud. We believe, we don't have Ingress and Egress costs on some of the services or the solutions that we're providing, which is a benefit, and it makes it that, again, manageable, that transparency element, that you know what you're subscribing to, you know what you're paying for and what you're utilizing. I think it's super important for businesses to be in control overall and not just one element. So I think that's kind of the last thought that I would leave the audience with as they're making their selection or embarking this journey or continuing this journey, as it may be.
Okay, right. So yes, lots to think about. So a really big thanks to all of you. Great panel. Alex, Heikki, Hiran, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you very much for that. So let's finish here. Couple of points that have really struck me, that's working its way through all of this discussion. First of all, the skills gap and that great resignation that we all talk about, it's real. So we really need to focus on the value add, leave the time consuming management bit to others. It's probably the right time to seriously think about that. The other thing that struck me, it may be time to embrace the open source type solutions. I know going down the proprietary route with hyperscalers may be a bit easier at times, but like Hiran just quite rightly pointed out, it could lock you in inadvertently because of the data regress costs, and that is going to go and hurt later. So, it's something worthwhile considering. Yeah, good points. So this discussion has been recorded, so you'll be sent an email that signposts where that is, in case you want to listen to some parts again or even share with your colleagues. Plus, there'll be a link to some additional resources that may help you take advantage of the services we've talked about today. Our next roundtable is going to be taking place in the last week of March. And on it, we'll be covering the practical challenges that get underestimated and sometimes even overlooked altogether. That registration link will also be on the email that you get. And then a final thing to say is that we value your feedback. So please take 2 minutes to answer only 3 questions that you will see on the screen after we close. It'll make sure that we provide the discussions that help you win. So thank you to all of you, the listeners. See you next time. Goodbye.